a warm summer afternoon. It was a warm summer afternoon in the heart of Maplewood, a neighborhood known for its vibrant community spirit and family-friendly atmosphere. Children laughed and played in the streets, their voices mingling with the sound of cicadas buzzing in the trees. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden hue over everything it touched. On this particular day, a group of kids had gathered in a small park at the end of Oak Street. Among them was 12-year-old Malik Johnson, a bright and energetic boy with an infectious smile and an unyielding love for basketball. Malik had spent countless afternoons shooting hoops with his friends, perfecting his jump shot and dreaming of one day playing in the NBA. He wore a worn-out pair of sneakers and a faded red jersey that had seen better days, but to him, they were symbols of his passion. As he dribbled the ball back and forth, his laughter echoed through the air, drawing smiles from passing neighbors. The neighborhood Maplewood was a diverse community, a melting pot of cultures and backgrounds. Families had lived here for generations, fostering connections that ran deep. The streets were lined with oak trees, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. Neighbors often gathered on porches to share stories or enjoy barbecues together. It was this sense of camaraderie that made Maplewood feel like home to so many. However, beneath this idyllic surface lay an undercurrent of tension that had been building over the years. Incidents involving law enforcement had sparked conversations about race and community relations. While most residents cherished their neighborhood's diversity, there were still lingering fears and misunderstandings that occasionally flared up. The arrival of Officer Smith. On this particular day, Officer James Smith was patrolling the area. A dedicated officer with over a decade on the force, he prided himself on knowing the community well. He often stopped to chat with residents and play basketball with kids like Malik when he could find the time. However, as a white officer in a predominantly black neighborhood, he was acutely aware of how his presence could be perceived. As he drove down Oak Street in his patrol car, Officer Smith noticed Malik and his friends playing basketball near the park. He smiled to himself, remembering how he used to play in similar neighborhoods as a kid. But as he approached, he felt a familiar tension rise within him, a mix of duty and apprehension. The encounter. Pulling over to the curb, Officer Smith stepped out of his car. The sound of his footsteps on the pavement caught Malik's attention. The boy paused mid-dribble and looked up, curiosity replacing his earlier joy. The other kids fell silent as they turned to see what was happening. "Hey there, what's going on?" Officer Smith called out with a friendly wave. "Just playing some ball," Malik replied enthusiastically, bouncing the basketball twice before passing it to his friend. Officer Smith walked closer, maintaining an approachable demeanor. "You guys are getting pretty good. Mind if I join you for a few minutes?" The kids exchanged excited glances. It wasn't every day that an officer joined their game. "Sure," Malik said eagerly. A moment of connection. As they played together, laughter filled the air once more. Officer Smith took turns shooting hoops and encouraging Malik's skills while sharing stories from his own childhood, tales of mischief and adventure that resonated with the young boys. For those brief moments, there were no barriers between them, just a shared love for basketball. But as they played, some residents observed from their porches with mixed feelings. Some smiled at the sight of an officer engaging positively with children, while others frowned, recalling past incidents that had left scars on their community's trust. An unexpected turn. Just as things seemed to be going well, an unexpected event unfolded that would change everything in an instant. A commotion erupted from down the street. A loud argument between two neighbors escalated quickly into shouts and accusations. Malik and his friends paused their game, glancing over at the source of the noise. Officer Smith instinctively turned toward the commotion as well. It was part of his duty to ensure peace in the neighborhood. "Stay here," he instructed Malik gently, before jogging toward the source of the disturbance. As he approached, tensions flared higher between two families who had been feuding for years over property lines and perceived slights. Voices rose above each other as accusations flew back and forth. Officer Smith intervened calmly but firmly, trying to mediate between them. A community divided. While Officer Smith worked to defuse the situation, Malik stood by with his friends, watching intently as emotions ran high. He could feel an uneasy tension building, not just from the argument but also from witnessing how quickly things could escalate between neighbors who once shared barbecues and laughter. The scene around them began to shift. Some neighbors stepped out onto their porches to watch what was unfolding, while others whispered among themselves about what might happen next. In that moment, Malik felt a mix of confusion and concern. He admired Officer Smith, but also sensed that not everyone felt safe or comfortable around police presence due to past experiences. Setting up for what's next. As Officer Smith continued to mediate between the two families, Malik couldn't help but wonder how this situation would affect him and his friends moving forward. Would people remember this moment as one where peace prevailed, or would it deepen existing divides? Little did they know that this incident would soon ripple through their community in ways none could anticipate, sparking conversations about race relations, trust in law enforcement, and ultimately leading to an unexpected gathering that would change everything for Maplewood. Tensions rise. As Officer Smith worked to calm the situation between the feuding neighbors, Malik stood at the edge of the park, his heart racing. The laughter and camaraderie he had felt just moments before were replaced by a sense of unease. He watched as Officer Smith, who had been so friendly just a short while ago, now faced a different kind of challenge, one that required authority and control. "Listen, folks," Officer Smith said, his voice steady but firm. "We can't resolve this by shouting at each other. Let's take a step back and talk this out calmly." But the shouting continued, fueled by years of resentment and misunderstandings. Malik could see the frustration etched on Officer Smith's face as he tried to mediate. The officer was respected in the community, but even he had limits when faced with deeply rooted conflicts. The turning point. Just then, one of the neighbors, Mrs. Thompson, a middle-aged woman known for her fiery temper, pointed an accusing finger at Mr. Jenkins, her neighbor across the street. "You're always trying to take advantage of me. This is about more than just a fence." Mr. Jenkins, a retired veteran with a reputation for being gruff but fair, shot back, "I'm not trying to take anything from you. You're the one who keeps making this personal." Malik felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had grown up watching these neighbors interact in more peaceful times. Now it seemed that years of grievances had boiled over into this explosive confrontation. Officer Smith's efforts. "Let's focus on what we can do to resolve this," Officer Smith urged, stepping between them to prevent any escalation. "I'm here to help you both find a solution. Why don't we sit down and talk it through?" The crowd that had gathered began to murmur among themselves. Some residents nodded in agreement with Officer Smith's approach, while others looked skeptical. Malik noticed how the atmosphere shifted from playful to serious in an instant. As tensions flared and voices rose again, Malik felt compelled to move closer. He wanted to understand what was happening, not just for himself, but for his friends who were still watching from the sidelines. A call for calm. "Everyone!" Malik shouted, surprising himself with his own boldness. "Can we just stop yelling? It's not helping." The crowd turned to look at him, and for a moment, silence fell over the group. Officer Smith glanced at Malik with a mixture of surprise and appreciation. "Malik's right," he said, using this unexpected moment to regain control of the situation. "Let's take a breath and remember that we're neighbors first." Mrs. Thompson crossed her arms, but seemed to soften slightly at Malik's words. Mr. Jenkins looked taken aback, but nodded slowly. "Okay," he said reluctantly. "Let's hear each other out." The conversation begins. With everyone finally settling down, they began to talk through their issues, slowly at first, but gradually finding common ground as they shared their perspectives. Malik listened intently as they discussed their grievances about property lines and misunderstandings that had festered over time. Officer Smith facilitated the conversation skillfully, reminding them of their shared history as neighbors who had once celebrated holidays together and supported one another through tough times. "I remember when we all came together for the block party last summer," he reminded them gently. "We had such a great time. Let's not forget that we're part of this community." A glimpse of unity. As they talked, Malik felt a sense of hope rising within him. He could see how quickly things could go wrong, but also how dialogue could pave the way for healing. The conversation shifted from accusations to understanding, as both sides began to express their feelings without hostility. "I didn't realize how much my actions were affecting you," Mrs. Thompson admitted after listening to Mr. Jenkins' side of things. "And I never meant to make you feel like I was trying to take advantage," Mr. Jenkins replied sincerely. Malik felt proud watching them work through their differences. It reminded him that even in moments of conflict, there was potential for reconciliation. An unexpected disruption. Just as it seemed progress was being made, an unexpected disruption occurred. A loud voice shouted from across the street. It was Tony Ramirez, a local resident known for stirring up trouble rather than fostering peace. "What are you doing? Talking to that cop?" Tony yelled out disdainfully from his porch where he sat with some friends drinking soda. "You think he cares about us? He's just here to keep us in line." The atmosphere shifted again as murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some residents nodded in agreement with Tony, while others looked frustrated by his interruption. Officer Smith turned toward Tony calmly but firmly. "I'm here because I care about this community and want to help resolve conflicts peacefully." The community divided again. But Tony wasn't finished. He continued shouting provocatively, trying to incite anger among residents who were already on edge due to previous tensions with law enforcement. "Yeah, right. You think we don't know what you really want? You're just waiting for us to slip up so you can come down hard on us." Tony spat out bitterly. Malik could feel the tension rising once more. It was as if all their hard work was about to unravel because of one person's negativity. "Stop it!" Malik shouted again, feeling an urgency rise within him. "This isn't helping anyone." A moment of reflection. The crowd fell silent again as they turned their attention back to Malik, this time with curiosity rather than hostility. "I know some people have bad experiences with cops," he said earnestly, looking directly at Tony and then at everyone else around him. "But we need to try talking instead of fighting." Officer Smith nodded in agreement while looking at Malik with admiration for his courage. "Malik is right," he said softly yet firmly. "We can't let anger dictate our actions or our relationships with each other." A shift in perspective. Slowly but surely, something began to shift within the crowd. People started reflecting on their own experiences rather than just reacting out of fear or anger. Tony crossed his arms, but seemed less hostile now, perhaps even considering what Malik had said. "I get it," Tony replied begrudgingly after a moment of silence filled with contemplation among those present around him. Finding common ground. With tensions easing slightly, Officer Smith took advantage of this momentary calmness and suggested they all sit down together, literally, to discuss their concerns further over refreshments provided by nearby residents who had gathered out of curiosity. As they moved toward picnic tables set up in front yards nearby where food was laid out earlier for casual gatherings during warmer months like this one, the atmosphere began transforming from confrontation into collaboration. Malik felt a sense of pride wash over him. Maybe they could turn this day around after all. Building bridges. As they sat together sharing snacks and stories, a mix of laughter and serious discussions filled the air. Malik observed how people began finding common ground through shared experiences, rather than focusing solely on differences that divided them before today's events unfolded so dramatically. He watched as Mrs. Thompson offered Mr. Jenkins some cookies she'd baked earlier, while sharing anecdotes about her children growing up playing together years ago when things weren't so complicated, between families living side by side, here in Maplewood Neighborhood. The power of connection. In that moment, a realization dawned upon Malik. Sometimes all it took was an open heart, willing enough not only listen, but also speak up against negativity whenever it threatened. Disrupt harmony within communities like theirs, where love prevailed over hate. Despite challenges faced daily by individuals living there together harmoniously, despite differences amongst them, all too often overlooked previously, until now. As conversations flowed freely among neighbors reconnecting through laughter, the sun began setting behind trees lining streets, casting warm hues across faces, illuminated by newfound hope, shining brightly amidst darkness, lurking just moments prior when chaos threatened tear apart. Bonds forged over years spent living side by side within Maplewood Neighborhood itself, a new understanding. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over Maplewood, the atmosphere shifted from one of tension to one of camaraderie. The picnic tables were filled with residents sharing food, laughter, and stories. Malik watched as the barriers that had once divided neighbors began to dissolve. He felt a sense of pride swell within him. He had played a small part in bringing people together. Officer Smith moved from table to table, engaging with residents and encouraging them to share their thoughts. "This is what community looks like," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "We're all in this together." Malik noticed how people who had previously avoided each other now sat side by side, discussing their lives and experiences. Mrs. Thompson and Mr. Jenkins were deep in conversation, laughing over shared memories of their children, playing together in the park. The role of social media. As word spread about the incident and the subsequent gathering, social media began buzzing with activity. Local residents took to platforms like Facebook and Instagram to share their perspectives on what had happened that day. Posts ranged from videos of Officer Smith playing basketball with Malik to heartfelt reflections on community unity. "Today was a turning point for Maplewood," one post read. "We can't let misunderstandings tear us apart. Let's keep this momentum going." Hashtags like Maplewood Unity and Community First began trending within the neighborhood, sparking conversations that extended beyond just the immediate area. People from neighboring communities chimed in, sharing their own stories of conflict and resolution. The power of dialogue. In the days that followed, discussions continued among residents about how they could foster better relationships within their community. Several neighbors proposed regular meetings to discuss issues openly and create a platform for dialogue. Malik's heart raced at the thought. He had witnessed firsthand how communication could bridge gaps. One evening, a community meeting was organized at the local community center. Residents gathered in droves, eager to share their thoughts and ideas on how to improve relations between law enforcement and the community. Officer Smith was invited to speak at the meeting, and as he stood before a packed room, he felt a mix of nervousness and hope. "I want you all to know that I'm here to serve you," he began, his voice steady. "But I can't do it alone. We need your input and your trust." A call for change. The atmosphere in the room was charged with energy as residents shared their experiences, some positive, others negative, about interactions with law enforcement. Malik listened intently as people recounted stories of misunderstandings that had led to fear or mistrust. "I've lived here for over 20 years, said Mr. Johnson, an elderly resident known for his wisdom. "I've seen things change for better and worse. We need to find ways to connect rather than divide." Another resident chimed in. "It's not just about police presence. It's about building relationships. We need events where we can all come together, barbecues, sports games, anything that brings us closer. Building bridges through events." Inspired by these discussions, Malik proposed an idea during the meeting. What if we organized a community sports day? We could have basketball games, soccer matches, something fun where everyone can participate. The room erupted into applause at Malik's suggestion. Officer Smith nodded enthusiastically, seeing the potential for such an event to foster unity among residents. "That's a fantastic idea," he exclaimed. "I'd be happy to help organize it." As plans began taking shape for the sports day, excitement buzzed through Maplewood like electricity in the air. Flyers were created, social media posts were shared, and word spread quickly about this upcoming event meant to celebrate community spirit. Anticipation builds. As the date approached, anticipation grew among residents. Families began preparing for a day filled with fun activities. Barbecue pits were reserved, volunteers signed up for organizing games, and local businesses offered sponsorships for food and prizes. Malik felt a sense of ownership over this event. It was his idea that had sparked such enthusiasm among his neighbors. He spent hours helping organize teams and setting up games, while also ensuring everyone felt included, regardless of skill level. On the day of the event, Maplewood Park transformed into a vibrant hub of activity. Colorful banners hung from trees, grills sizzled with delicious food, and laughter echoed throughout as neighbors reunited over shared interests. A day of unity. The day arrived with clear skies and sunshine pouring down on Maplewood Park. Families arrived early, setting up picnic blankets and preparing for a day filled with sports and connection. Children ran around excitedly, while adults mingled over plates of grilled burgers and hot dogs. Malik took charge of organizing basketball games on one court, while Officer Smith helped coordinate soccer matches nearby. The energy was infectious as teams formed spontaneously. People cheered each other on regardless of age or background. As Malik played basketball alongside Officer Smith, a moment he would cherish forever. He felt a sense of belonging wash over him. They laughed together as they shot hoops. It was hard to believe that just days before they had faced such tension. Breaking down barriers. Throughout the day, barriers continued breaking down as residents engaged in friendly competition while also sharing stories about their lives outside sports, where they grew up or what brought them joy, and slowly but surely building connections previously thought impossible given past experiences. At one point during lunch break, when everyone gathered around picnic tables laden with food, a local musician set up nearby playing cheerful tunes, creating an inviting atmosphere. Malik noticed Mrs. Thompson chatting animatedly with Tony Ramirez, who had been quite vocal during previous confrontations between neighbors earlier this week. "Who would have thought?" Malik mused silently, watching them bond over shared interests in music while laughing together. It was moments like these that reminded him why community meant so much more than mere proximity. It was about understanding each other's humanity beyond labels placed upon individuals based solely upon appearances alone. A moment of reflection. As dusk settled over Maplewood Park, the sun dipping low, casting golden hues across faces illuminated by newfound friendships forged amidst laughter echoing throughout, the realization dawned upon Malik. Sometimes all it took was an open heart, willing enough not only listen, but also speak up against negativity whenever it threatened to disrupt harmony within communities like theirs, where love prevailed over hate. Despite challenges faced daily by individuals living there together harmoniously, despite differences amongst them, all too often overlooked previously, until now. As families packed up their belongings after an incredible day filled with joy, the sense that something significant had shifted within Maplewood lingered in the air. A collective understanding that they were stronger together than apart resonated deeply among everyone present today. Looking ahead. In the weeks following this successful event, conversations continued flowing freely among neighbors. People shared ideas about future gatherings aimed at fostering deeper connections while also addressing issues affecting their community head-on without fear or hesitation. Malik found himself increasingly involved not just as an organizer, but also as a bridge builder between different groups within Maplewood who may have otherwise remained isolated from one another, due misunderstandings stemming from past grievances left unaddressed far too long. With each passing day, the bonds forged through laughter-filled afternoons spent playing sports together grew stronger, solidifying friendships built upon trust, respect, understanding cultivated through shared experiences rather than preconceived notions based solely upon appearances alone. A new chapter for Maplewood. As winter approached, the spirit of unity remained alive within Maplewood. Plans were made for holiday gatherings where families could come together once again, celebrating diversity, embracing differences, finding strength through connection rather than division. Malik knew this was just beginning, a new chapter unfolding before them, all filled with promise, hope, possibility, awaiting exploration ahead. Together they would continue building bridges, fostering understanding, nurturing love amidst challenges faced daily, reminding themselves always, united, they stood, divided, they fell. A lesson learned forever, etched into hearts, minds alike forevermore. A new beginning. As the new year dawned upon Maplewood, a sense of renewal filled the air. The community had come together in ways that many had thought impossible just months before. The sports day, youth forums, and ongoing discussions had not only fostered understanding, but also ignited a spark of hope for a brighter future. Malik stood at the edge of Maplewood Park, watching as families gathered for the first community event of the year, a winter festival celebrating unity and diversity. Colorful banners adorned the park, and laughter echoed as children played games while adults mingled over hot cocoa and freshly baked goods. He felt a sense of pride swell within him. This was his neighborhood, his home, transformed by collective effort and a shared commitment to understanding one another. The festival, the Winter Festival, was a culmination of everything they had worked toward over the past few months. Malik had played an instrumental role in organizing it, collaborating with Officer Smith and other residents to create an event that would bring everyone together in celebration. As he moved through the crowd, he noticed familiar faces, neighbors who had once avoided each other now sharing stories and laughter. Mrs. Thompson was chatting animatedly with Tony Ramirez, their earlier tensions forgotten as they bonded over their children's antics. Malik smiled at the sight. This was what community looked like. "Hey, Malik," called out Officer Smith, waving him over. "We're about to start the games. You ready?" "Absolutely," Malik replied, excitement bubbling within him. "What do we have planned?" Games and activities. The festival featured a variety of activities: snowman building contests, relay races, and even a friendly basketball tournament that Malik was eager to participate in. As teams formed, he felt a rush of adrenaline. It wasn't just about winning, but about bringing people together through friendly competition. As the games commenced, laughter filled the air. Malik played alongside friends from school and neighbors he had only recently met. The atmosphere was electric with camaraderie. Everyone cheered for each other regardless of which team they were on. During a break between games, Malik took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. Just a few months ago, fear and mistrust had clouded their interactions. Now, they were united by shared experiences and a commitment to fostering understanding. A moment of gratitude. As dusk began to settle over Maplewood Park, Malik gathered with Officer Smith and other organizers to take a moment to appreciate what they had accomplished together. "Look at this," Officer Smith said, gesturing to the crowd enjoying themselves. "This is what happens when we come together." Malik nodded in agreement. "It's amazing how much can change when we're willing to listen to each other." Officer Smith smiled warmly. "You've been a key part of this transformation, Malik. Your courage to speak up has inspired others." Feeling a sense of responsibility wash over him, Malik replied, "I just wanted everyone to feel included. We all deserve to be heard." Sharing stories. As night fell and twinkling lights illuminated the park, residents gathered around for storytelling, a tradition that had emerged during their previous meetings. Each person took turns sharing stories about their lives, their hopes for the future, and what community meant to them. Malik listened intently as neighbors shared heartfelt anecdotes about overcoming challenges and finding strength in each other. One woman spoke about her immigrant experience, how she had faced adversity but found solace in her neighbors' support. "I never felt alone here," she said tearfully. "You all welcomed me with open arms." Another man shared his journey as a single father navigating life's challenges while raising his children in Maplewood. "It's not always easy," he admitted, "but knowing I have neighbors who care makes all the difference." A collective vision. As stories flowed freely among attendees, the atmosphere shifted towards reflection. They began recognizing commonalities rather than focusing solely on differences. "I think we should have more events like this," suggested Jamal again from earlier discussions during youth forums. "It helps us see each other as people instead of just labels." Officer Smith nodded vigorously in agreement once more. "Absolutely! We need more opportunities for connection, whether it's through sports days or forums like this where we can talk honestly." Malik felt exhilarated watching his peers take ownership over these discussions. It was clear they were ready for change. As everyone left that day filled with hope, a sense that they could indeed shape their future together resonated deeply within him. Looking ahead. As winter turned into spring, the spirit of unity remained alive within Maplewood. Plans were made for upcoming events aimed at fostering deeper connections, while also addressing issues affecting their community head-on without fear or hesitation. Malik found himself increasingly involved not just as an organizer, but also as a bridge builder between different groups within Maplewood, who may have otherwise remained isolated from one another, due misunderstandings stemming from past grievances left unaddressed far too long. With each passing day, the bonds forged through laughter-filled afternoons spent playing sports together grew stronger, solidifying friendships built upon trust, respect, understanding cultivated through shared experiences rather than preconceived notions based solely upon appearances alone. A lasting impact. In the months that followed, the impact of their efforts became evident. Crime rates dropped significantly as relationships between law enforcement officers and residents improved dramatically. More importantly, people began feeling safer, knowing they could reach out for help without fear, judgment, or retribution. Malik saw firsthand how these changes positively affected everyone around him. Families felt empowered, knowing their voices mattered, while children grew up witnessing adults engage constructively rather than resorting hostility whenever conflicts arose. A community united. As summer approached, the spirit of unity remained alive within Maplewood. Plans were made for holiday gatherings where families could come together once again, celebrating diversity, embracing differences, finding strength through connection rather than division. Malik knew this was just beginning, a new chapter unfolding before them all filled with promise, hope, possibility awaiting exploration ahead. Together they would continue building bridges, fostering understanding, nurturing love amidst challenges faced daily, reminding themselves always, united they stood, divided they fell. A lesson learned forever etched into hearts' minds alike forevermore. Reflections under the stars. On one particularly clear night, Malik found himself sitting outside under starlit sky, reflecting on everything that had transpired since that fateful day when tensions threatened tear apart. Bonds forged over years spent living side by side within vibrant neighborhood, filled with love, laughter, resilience, perseverance. He couldn't help but smile, thinking back on how far they'd come, from fear, mistrust, isolation, towards embracing diversity, celebrating differences, forging connections based upon mutual respect, understanding, allowing love prevail over hate amidst challenges faced daily, reminding them always, united they stood, divided they fell, a lesson learned forever etched into hearts, minds alike, forevermore. With dreams soaring high above like stars twinkling brightly overhead, he felt grateful. Knowing change was possible when hearts opened, minds embraced understanding rather than judgment, allowing love prevail over hate amidst challenges faced daily, reminding them always, united they stood, divided they fell, a lesson learned forever etched into hearts' minds alike, forevermore.